All right, we can go ahead and start now. So we have Mr. Jordan Gray here. We have Mr. Jordan Gray here. Some little facts about him is he's a communications and outreach coordinator of the Turtle Survival Alliance. He does rewilding return turtles to the nature landscape. You can go ahead and take it away, Mr. Gray.
All right. Hey, good morning, good afternoon, good evening. No matter where you are, it's turtle time. Welcome back to the National Biodiversity Teach-In. I am super happy to be here again, spreading the love and the joy of turtles across the nation and across the world. So let me cue up my presentation just a moment, and we're going to get started with talking about rewilding. Whoops. All right, so rewilding, returning turtles to the natural landscape. Again, my name is Jordan Gray, and I work for an organization called the Turtle Survival Alliance. So who is Turtle Survival Alliance? Well, we first and foremost are committed to zero turtle extinctions. And we're really made up of a diverse assemblage of organizations and institutions and individuals with a passion for saving turtles. Together with our partners, the TSA is the largest and most comprehensive turtle and tortoise conservation organization in the world. But really, strategic partnerships are our core strength, plus a lot of really extraordinary people, many of which you will see in today's slideshow. So we work all over the world, from Bangladesh to Vietnam to the United States to Madagascar, as you can see here. And we do a lot of different things, whether it's rehabilitation or conservation breeding or habitat protection, or like we will talk about today, rewilding. And as you can see from this, we really make an impact for the world's most endangered freshwater turtles and tortoises. This is an infographic showing you around the world of 20 of the top 25 most endangered turtles in the world that we make a positive conservation impact for. So let's look at our TSA three-pronged conservation action approach. First and foremost, restore populations in the wild. Second, secure species in captivity through assurance colonies. And third, build the capacity to restore, secure, and conserve species within their range country, meaning the country in which that species is native to. And that may be multiple countries, and that's when we really try to make binational, trinational, multinational efforts to be able to preserve those animals and or get them back on the landscape. So let's take a look at this absolutely beautiful turtle right here. This is a subadult female northern river terrapin from the Sundarbans of Southeast India and Southwest Bangladesh. And she really embodies what we're talking about today. She came from founder animals at one of our assurance colonies in India. So she hatched from an egg. She was reared by our staff and associates there in the Sundarbans of India. And for the last 9 years, she has been under our care. But now that she's big enough, she got the chance to go back out into the wild. And you probably noticed that funky looking thing on top of her shell. Well, I'm going to tell you a little about that later on, but maybe you can take some guesses as to what that is. So what is rewilding? Well, in a simple sense, rewilding is conservation efforts aimed at restoring and protecting natural processes and wilderness areas. And part of that is letting the animals, the plants, everything come back to the way that it is supposed to be, the way that those animals have adapted and evolved, and the processes which have taken place to create those environments. And the Turtle Survival Alliance returns turtles to the natural landscape all across the world. And you can see from this, we're really, really spread out, though we do have a high concentration in Southeast Asia. So whether it's rewilding Central American river turtles in Belize in Central America, or the Dall's toad-headed turtle in Colombia, the radiated tortoise in Madagascar, the black softshell turtle in India, as well as the Asian giant tortoise in Bangladesh, the southern river terrapin in Cambodia, and the Burmese star tortoise in Myanmar. These are all animals in which we are working to not only preserve and protect the animals that are left in the wild, but also rewilding animals, getting them back out on the landscape so we can restore functioning populations of these animals. And that's because turtles and tortoises are the most endangered major order of vertebrates on the earth. More than 50% of turtles and tortoises are threatened with extinction right now. And so that means that we have a really big mountain to climb to be able to get these animals back on the landscape and into self-sustaining populations. That is, if we can't preserve and protect what is already there now. So do we simply just release a turtle? Do we take one that we've raised, like the one you saw for 9 years, and just say, off you go? No, simply we don't. But let's ask Jack so he can tell you more. Here we go. All right, we had to have a turtle on this program, right? So this is Jack. And Jack is the same turtle that you see there in the photo. And Jack, he was brought to us, and what we understand is he changed hands several times. Now, because Jack had changed hands and had been in captivity for a while, we decided to keep Jack as an outreach ambassador. He's a turtle that we can talk about his kind and talk about things like rewilding. But one of the biggest things to think about with Jack and other turtles and tortoises around the world is the fact that these animals have home ranges, okay, under the ground. Came up as about 1 inch long and then started to make its home range slowly, year by year. Okay, so think of an animal that lives for 80, 100, 120 years. These animals are very, very tied to their home ranges. And that's super important to think about when you want to return animals like Jack or other turtles and tortoises to the landscape. So the simple answer is no. We don't just release turtles and say, good luck, off you go. It's a very, very comprehensive process. And that process, so I was saying, how do we rewild turtles? By the way, these are Burmese roof turtles, one of the most endangered turtles in the world, being released into the Chinwin River of northwestern Myanmar. So it's a long science-based process, and I really have to emphasize that science-based part of that, because there's so much information with these long-lived animals that we have to take into account so that we can not only properly put them back on the landscape, but ensure that they will survive, that they will thrive, and hopefully reproduce, therefore continuing on those turtles in perpetuity in the wild. So how do we do this? Well, one of the things we do is called ground truthing. This is a term you might not have heard before, but think about it. Ground, boots on the ground. You are going out there, you are assessing habitats as to their suitability for these animals, and preferably that they're optimal for the turtles or tortoises to live in. And if not, do we have the ability to restore those habitats to the best liking and survivorship for those animals we're putting out there on the landscape? And one of the really cool things with ground truthing is doing aerial reconnaissance. In this photo in Madagascar, my friend Brett is flying a drone and he's going over this large swath of spiny forest, and he's actually mapping it with the drone so that we can really closely take a look at all the available habitat for radiated tortoises, picture I showed you just a couple of slides ago, for returning them to the wild. The next really big thing is community engagement. Think about it. Humans live all over the world now, okay? There's almost 8 billion people, and that number continues to climb. So we live in and amongst turtle populations, or maybe rather they live in and amongst humans now. So what we need to do if we are going to rewild landscapes and the turtles and tortoises in them is engage the communities in and around those landscapes to care about the turtles, to care about the landscape, and to care about what we do. And take a look at Jack, okay? Turtles are a very, very charismatic animal. So it's not overly difficult to engage people with wanting to help, but there are many, many factors that go into being able to sustain that engagement. Another thing to take into account are health evaluations. We only want to put the healthiest animals back out onto the environment. So say they came to us through a confiscation in the illegal wildlife trade. There's a lot they probably went through, and they might have picked up some pathogens or diseases along the way. They might have lost a lot of weight due to not eating or not drinking. So we need to do health evaluations on all the animals to make sure that the healthiest animals go out there so that they have the highest chance of surviving in the wild. And part of that is disease screening, like I was saying. There's a lot of different diseases that turtles and tortoises can transmit to one another, just like with humans. So one of the things we do is not only test the turtles and tortoises that we want to get back out onto the landscape for diseases, but we'll also take samples from turtles and tortoises that already live on the landscape where we want to rewild these animals to, so that we can get an understanding of what the, say, pathogen makeup in the population looks like. Will the turtles that we're putting out there survive, or conversely, could they potentially infect the turtles and tortoises that are already there with pathogens, which could cause real big problems such as sickness and or death? Genetics. Genetics can be a really big thing because some species of turtles and tortoise live in a small area. Maybe they're endemic or only live in a certain part of a location. Or maybe they have a large range. So let's say the turtles in New Hampshire also live in Georgia. Well, those turtles might be very different in their genetic makeup because of how far apart their populations live. So we want to know, what does the genetics of the animals look like that we want to put on the landscape? Are they quite divergent? Do they differ greatly? Or conversely, again, are they similar? Are they too similar? Could that lead to inbreeding in the future, which could cause other problems? So those are important things for us to know. So let's look at this. This is really cool. And this is part of TSA's strategy to putting turtles and tortoises back out in the wild. This is soft release habitat preparation. What you're looking at is a dense subtropical forest in the Chattagram Hills of southeastern Bangladesh. And you're also seeing this fencing. What we want to do when we put turtles and tortoises out in the landscape, based on what I was talking about with Jack, the fact that these animals have home ranges, is we want to imprint them or instill in them site fidelity, basically accepting this new home as their home. And this can take 6, 8, 12, maybe even more months for the animals to accept their new home. Think of the dire consequences that could happen if an animal that is used to a home range somewhere else gets put to somewhere they're unfamiliar. They could end up traveling for days, weeks, maybe even years on end looking for their old home, in which there's a good chance they are not going to find, or it's possible that they could die along the way. So it's very important that we set up these, and I'm talking about big soft release pens. These can be many acres in size in the exact habitat in which we are going to release these animals. So it could be a forest, or like this anchored pen here in the Chinwin River of Myanmar, it could be a floating habitat in which the animals get used to this new river environment before being hard released or set free out into the environment for them to then go about living their life. And part of setting them free and living that life for us is knowing, what are they doing? Where are they going? Are they surviving? Are they reproducing? And so we will prepare all of, or a subset or a group of these animals for tracking. And that might be a radio transmitter, a satellite transmitter, a GPS logger, or an acoustic transmitter. All of those are devices that are able to give us information as to how our turtles and tortoises do once they're released. And this is a really important part that leads to the science of being able to perform future releases. And look at this really cool picture. It's funny too. So this is radio transmitters drying on tortoises. Why do they have to be propped up like that? Well, we don't want the tortoise knocking the transmitter off. And so they're just very temporarily propped up like that so that they don't knock that transmitter around and the epoxy has time to dry. And that doesn't take too long. So don't worry, these animals aren't out on those pedestals for too long, or in this case, coffee mugs. Which reminds me, I think it's time for a coffee break. Something else that we do, and this is super cool with rewilding, is engaging a religious connection to the animals, to the rewilding process, to the habitats. And in this picture, you see Buddhist monks who are performing a religious ceremony for these southern river terrapins before they are released back into the wild in Cambodia. And we do this in many different countries where we are able to create this connection with the community. Because you have to think about how strong religion can be. And when people see that these animals have been blessed, have been accepted by whether it's Buddhist monks or possibly in Hinduism or in Islam, there is a connection to the community for these animals. And then it's time for the release. Of course, that's the biggest day of all. This is a moment that oftentimes takes years to get to, years. So just think of that when, let's just say you think about a turtle that you might want to pick up off the road and move it somewhere else. Well, when we put animals back on the wild, it's a years-long process. So the best thing in a case like that to do is just simply move the turtle to the other side of the road and let it keep on going. And these releases are big events, okay? So you have media, you have the biologists, you have people from government, you have community members, you have members of the religious communities, and they're really amazing events. And that's just now, again, right about at the midpoint. Because like being drafted by a professional sports team, now the big test comes. Now can they survive in the wild? And while we're doing that, we want to create these memorable moments. So we will oftentimes have school groups come out, big community groups, all sorts of gatherings, so that people can feel connected to these animals and have this memorable moment, like here in along the Mekong River of Cambodia, where they're releasing hatchlings of the Cantor's giant softshell turtle, which is one of the most endangered turtles in the world. Think how cool that is to be able to release, when you're a kid, one of the world's most endangered turtles. I mean, it's just I know I would never forget. So after we release them, we need to monitor them, right? And they have these tracking devices on them. And so this is a intensive process, going through and tracking where these animals are going. Again, how are they doing? Are they surviving? Are they breeding? Are they thriving? And so that's whether it's by land, or we'll call this by sea. This is a big river in the Sundarbans of India, after that female northern river terrapin that you met at the beginning was released. And finally, we get to community protection. So we've done all the science, we've done all these other community engagements, we've done the disease screening and the soft release, really instilling in the animals the acceptance of this area as their new home. Well, we want these areas and their animals to be protected, right? So we take it upon ourselves to create these communities that are basically wardens of the turtles, wardens of the habitats, so that there will be this long-lasting protection for these animals. And a lot of times those are protections that will be passed on through generations. And that is the best way to be able to keep these animals safe after they've been released back into the wild. Just a second, Jack is getting pretty squirmy, so I gotta put him down here a minute. All right, so let's look at a rewilding spotlight. And the reason I wanna look at this one is because just 2 days ago, on the 1st of February, marks the 2-year milestone since a coup occurred in the country of Myanmar. The country of Myanmar is somewhere where we have extremely successful programs, where we've had all these achievements we've made. Well, 2 years ago, on the 1st of February, the military overthrew the democratically elected government. And you can imagine that caused major changes in the country. Luckily, because the perseverance of all the people in our programs, these programs are continuing. The turtles and tortoises are still, they're not just doing well, they are thriving and they are reproducing in record numbers. And that's just a testament to the people and all that they have done and all that they have gone through. So I want to focus on not only that aspect, but the fact that the program I'm about to show you is akin to returning gray wolves to the environment in the United States, or the bald eagle, or alligators. Okay, this is one of conservation's great success stories. So here's a quiz for you. Do you know which one of these Southeast Asian countries is Myanmar? It can be hard to pick out, and knowing which Southeast country is which, just like in European countries or anywhere around the world for that matter, can be difficult. All right, did you get it right? There it is. That is the country of Myanmar, a beautiful country with absolutely wonderful people and amazing wildlife. And it is sandwiched right in between the 2 most populous countries on earth of India and China. So take a look at this tortoise. Okay, this is a beautiful animal, and this is called the Burmese star tortoise. Now, because of this tortoise's beauty, this animal was heavily poached for the pet trade. Its beauty basically led to its demise. And this animal is only found in Myanmar. They are endemic, or again, only found in or only native to the central dry zone of central Myanmar. And because of the tortoise's very ornately decorated shell, the international pet trade wanted them. And so when you have these large countries where wildlife trafficking exists in great numbers, such as China and Myanmar's neighbor, Thailand, you have this influx of people coming to get these tortoises. So sadly, by the early to mid 2000s, and that's really not that long ago, this tortoise was basically wiped out. Okay, it was functionally extinct in the wild. That means there were so few left that they were no longer ecologically viable. The chance of a male and female coming together to make more tortoises was next to non-existent. So what did we do? Turtle Survival Alliance, Wildlife Conservation Society, and the Myanmar Forest Department came together. We created a nucleus of a breeding program by acquiring 175 tortoises that were confiscated from illegal trade, putting them together and hoping for the best that they bred, so that they created more tortoises. And that is exactly what happened. Look at the years on those little placards. So the one closest to us says the 31st of December 2008. So it wasn't too long after that these tortoises started reproducing. And those are actually where nests are underground beneath these other tortoises who are just hanging out and getting some sunshine. Well, those eggs luckily started hatching, and the tortoises started being reared and thriving in captivity. And then what happened? Well, thousands started hatching and thousands more. So much so that now on an annual basis, more than 2,000 Burmese star tortoises hatch at our assurance colonies in Myanmar. And with so many tortoises, that is a great opportunity to get them back out in the landscape, to rewild the central dry zone with the Burmese star tortoise. So think about everything that I've talked about to this point, everything that goes into rewilding these animals. And that occurred for the Burmese star tortoise, for thousands of them. So you have thousands of health screenings. And you have to find that right habitat to put them back into. And for these animals, that came in the form of wildlife sanctuaries. Shui Satal, Minzantong, Lakanander, and Chatin wildlife sanctuaries in the central dry zone not only provided the right habitat that you see here, but were also places that the tortoise was once known to exist. Now, if you take a close look in this picture, you will see a fence. And that whole area you see is part of a soft release enclosure, again, preparing tortoises for life in the wild. Now, something that is a bit different than maybe something you've ever seen with animals returning to the wild is this process. And this is tattooing the animals. And there's a reason that we're tattooing them. It is called Sadapawa. Now, Sadapawa is a Buddhist protection. Sorry, I lost for words for a second. It provides the animal's protection, spiritual protection by the gods of the forest should anyone bring harm or poach these animals. And this is tattooed on every single tortoise that we release. And so we hope that it is a deterrent to anyone, especially those that observe these, observe Buddhism, that these animals could potentially bring you harm in your life should you poach them from the wild. So it's a really interesting and innovative technique to trying to keep tortoises safe on the landscape. And part of that Sada Pawa is also then donating these animals, and that is it's not an actual donation to the temple, but it is a ceremonial donation whereby the tortoises are ceremoniously donated. The monks bless them, and then they are released into the wild. So this is just an absolutely amazing, just beautiful process that takes place in Myanmar. And then comes time for the release, the time that we all love. And this is a group of staff and biologists from Turtle Survival Alliance, the Wildlife Conservation Society, and the Myanmar Forest Department. And this is at Minzamtong Wildlife Sanctuary. And what you see here inside this nice, lush, soft release pen is a little watering hole that was made out of concrete for the tortoises. So they always have this little base of water that they can come back to because they live in the central dry zone where it can go months and months without raining. They actually go through what are called monsoon seasons, which are seasonal shifts in wind patterns. So to release the tortoises, they're all first brought for a soak in this central pool and then released out into the wild. So once in the soft release pen, they stay there for about a year. And then all that needs to occur is panels or walls of the soft release pen are removed. Not all of them, it can just be a few. And then as the tortoises wander their habitat, they can go, oh, look, there's an opening. Let me check it out. And they can naturally self-disperse out into the environment. And our work has shown that this is successful, that this works with imprinting these animals to their new habitat. And there is just, there is nothing more beautiful than seeing these animals, especially an animal that was poached to functional extinction in the wild, back out on the landscape, rewilded. Now, what you see there, that lump on its back, that's one of those transmitters, the radio transmitter. And many of the tortoises have that. And as you can see, it also has that Sada Pawa tattoo markings on one side, and then tattoo markings of a unique code, a number code on the other. And this is a beautiful juvenile tortoise now living where it should be, in the wild. So what comes after that? Well, of course, we have to go and track the tortoises. We have to keep up with them, see how they're doing. And what did we find? Well, we found that not only were they staying in the area where we released them, they had that site fidelity instilled in them. They also found other tortoises. They matured, they thrived, and they started reproducing in the wild. So you go again from an animal that was functionally extinct only about, between 15 to 20 years ago now, returning it to the wild, having those animals mature, and then laying eggs in the wild. And then, of course, this happens. Wild tortoises hatching in the wild on the natural landscape in the central dry zone of Myanmar is just a beautiful story. And not only is it something that has shown that this is working, but it shows that the eggs are incubating well here. So what we've been able to do is actually make a transition. We've been able to transition some of the program to not only incubating the eggs in captivity at the assurance colonies in Myanmar, but we will translocate or take from one place to another clutches of eggs, bury them into makeshift nests in the wild, in those wildlife sanctuaries, so that the tortoises can just hatch out naturally. Off they go for a wild existence. So this is combining now different methods to be able to rewild this landscape with the animals that should naturally be on them. So the main thing here to think about is rewilding. Everything I've talked about, it's difficult. It's a long process. A turtle, a tortoise, other animals, think about it. These are long-lived animals. These are animals that have these home ranges. These are animals that require specific habitat needs and really need to have that habitat preserved in all of its integrity for their survival. For a turtle or tortoise in their lifetime, the goal is to reproduce, let's say for a female, reproduce herself and a male to keep that population stable. The decline population is occurring, they can't even do that. So 100 years, and with all the threats against them, aren't even able to reproduce just themselves and the male that they made with two animals. And to increase a population, you of course have to have more of those animals surviving. So a lot goes into rewilding. It's not easy, but it's worth it. And I want to show you this quick video that, I mean, when I watch it, it gives me the feels, okay? It gives me the feels because an animal going back into the wild in its native habitat is a beautiful thing. And I love turtles, so this is all the better. Let me play this for you really quick. Oh, that guy is so cute. Look at those little tortoise legs moving. He has his transmitter on him. He's just so cute. Wait, okay, I'll play that for you one more time. It's not just cute, but it's, I hope, inspiring to see this animal go off into the central dry zone of Myanmar, a success story and something that we hope through all of the adversity in Myanmar right now, we can continue to do for years and years to come. So with that being said, I see there's a lot of questions and I wanted to save time so we can really flesh some of these things out. So of course, thank you. Thank you to Elgin High School. Thank you to Debbie McMullen and all of the organizers, to the National Biodiversity Teach-In. And if you want to learn more about us, please check us out at Turtle Survival on all of those social media apps you're used to, or turtlesurvival.org is our website. And if you'd like to send me an email, if you want to follow up, if you even would like a presentation for your school or community or group, my email address is right there, jgray@turtlesurvival.org. So with that being said, I'd love to get to some questions. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you for that. We appreciate learning about the turtles. Let's start off with the first question.
Okay.
What's the biggest turtle you've ever seen?
The biggest turtle I've ever seen? Woo! In the wild, I'm guessing. So let's go back to, okay, so I don't know if anybody knows what the biggest turtle on Earth is. Biggest turtle on Earth is the leatherback sea turtle. And they normally average around, 6, 7, 8 feet, but they can grow larger than that. Historically, specimens have grown larger than that, though it's not that common these days. Have I seen a leatherback in the wild? Unfortunately not. So I'd say the largest turtle that I've seen in the wild would be a loggerhead sea turtle, which they themselves can attain sizes of hundreds of pounds and be, just enormous in shell size. So I think I put it there.
Okay, so there's another question that says one of our students is named Jack. We'd like to know how old Jack the turtle is and how he chose his name.
All right, good one. And I'll bring Jack back out for this. Okay, so here's Jack once again. I'll give him his little up close there. So he's an absolutely beautiful animal. And so, all right, I'm really simple with naming turtles. I don't think about it all that much. If a turtle has spots on them, I'll call them spotty. If they have speckles on them, I'll call them speckles. Stripes, guess what? I'll probably call them striper. All right. But with Jack here, so Jack is a box turtle. So I went really corny on this one and named him Jack because, yeah, you got it. Jack in the box. So we have Jack in the box right here, which reminds me, please, boys and girls at home, please do not keep a box turtle in a box. The box refers to their shell and the way that they can close into their shell. And I have to put out that little Jordanary PSA because the number of times that I've seen box turtles put into cardboard boxes and then fed lettuce is more than I want to count. So remember, they're called box turtles because of their morphology, not because they want to be put into a box. So that's a PSA from Jack and I.
All right, thank you.
All right, next question. Good one.
Next one is gonna be from so many questions on YouTube. How often do you get to be in the field for your job?
So I would like to be in the field more than I am. And I think any biologist will say that. So a lot of your time is spent behind a computer. There's so much to do with conveying the scientific message, with education, with processing data. Actually, it's data. I'm sorry, I mispronounced, which now I'll cry myself to sleep. But processing data, there's a lot that goes into it, and a lot of that is on the computer. Now, when I can get out into the field, into the wild, I will, and I love being there. Okay, that's my, we'll call it, that's my church. All right. I go into the field to experience the wild and, of course, to see wildlife, especially turtles and tortoises. Now, I do involve myself in TSA programs, and then I also do my own field research projects, and those I will travel for, and I sustain those types of projects through friends of mine who help out and other collaborators, and then gaining financial contributions to keep those kind of projects going. Good question. I kind of want to go get out in the wild right now.
Thank you. Now we have another question that says, do turtles have toes?
Do turtles have toes? Heck yeah, they do. Now you might call them digits, but at the same thing. So on your fingers, on your fingers, on your hand, on your feet, we call them fingers and toes. Those are digits, and turtles and tortoises have toes or digits. And some species have 5, some have 4, some have 3. It can vary the number of toes on each foot. And for some species, like between the eastern box turtle, which Jack is, and the 3-toed box turtle, that is one of the morphological characteristics to be able to tell them apart. One has 3 toes on its back legs, one has 4 toes on its back legs. But in areas where the 2 subspecies overlap, they can have 3 or 4 toes. So it gets a little tricky there. Good question.
All right. Our next question is going to be Janessa would like to know how the trackers are put on snapping turtles.
How the trackers are put on snapping turtles? Very carefully. So snapping turtles, yes, they're called snapping turtles for a reason. They have a strong bite. It's a really fast bite. It's an animal you don't want to get bit by. But typically we put trackers like that. So whether it's we call them transmitters, will affix them towards the rear of the animal shell, where the animal is not able to reach around back to. Or there's other ways in which we can, say, cover the animal's head so that it doesn't reach around and snap us. But that is a common thing that we do, is put radio transmitters on things like common snapping turtles or alligator snapping turtles. The funny thing is, though, is common snapping turtles, which live in the Chicago area of Illinois, I would rather deal with a huge alligator snapping turtle, which is historically native to very, very southwestern Illinois, than I would with a common snapping turtle, because common snapping turtles, not only they have strong, sharp beaks, they also are very agile, and their neck can go all the way back around and potentially bite you. Alligator snapping turtles, they have a strong beak, a really strong bite, a fast bite, but their heads are so big and cumbersome that they can't move all that quickly to come around and bite you. Good question.
You've seen the bites.
Okay, so the next question is, Jaden is wondering how old turtles can get.
How old can turtles get? It's a huge range. So for them, generally what we're going to say is turtles can live about the same lifespan as a human. Okay, that's a long time. You know, there's other species of animals that only live for a few hours. There's other species that live for 5 years. There's some species of animals that can live for hundreds of years. The Greenland shark, for instance, hundreds of years. A koi fish, hundreds of years. Turtles, tortoises, we'll say the tortoise, or excuse me, the turtles with the least longevity live maybe 30, 40 years. The ones with the greatest longevity live up to about 200 years or so. So it's quite a range in there. And there's so many factors that are involved with whether a turtle or tortoise lives to a great ripe old age. Good question.
All right, before the next question, we have a comment. Jaylene from Rich Circle would like to tell you that she thinks the baby turtles are very cute. All right.
Baby turtles are very cute, okay? And it makes my job really, really well worth it to work with animals that are so cute. I don't know who doesn't love a baby turtle. So great comment.
And then next question is, what is your favorite type of turtle?
Oh, I'm glad. Wait, Jack is around. Because I don't want to like offend any turtle species out there. You know, there are 353 living types of turtles and tortoises, and there are so many that I love. A lot of when people ask that question, okay, a lot of my experiences and are really tied to nostalgia. So going back to my youth, growing up in upstate New York and Virginia. So animals like box turtles, which luckily Jack is, so he doesn't have to be offended. Wood turtles, spotted turtles, diamondback terrapins. Those are all favorites of mine. But one of the types of turtles, the batagarines, like that northern river terrapin I was talking about, or the Burmese roof turtle, or the southern river terrapin, those have a really, really soft, a special place in my heart. They're big, they're charismatic, and they just always look like they're smiling. And who doesn't love an animal that always looks like they're smiling? I mean, wouldn't we all love it if our friends and coworkers just always look like they were smiling? Mine always do, of course, because we work with turtles.
Yeah.
Okay, so the next question is, do turtles mind being held?
For the most part, yes. Think about it. Okay? Turtle this size, or a turtle this size, or a turtle this size. Most turtles and tortoises on Earth are smaller than you, okay, as a human. Okay, if you think of a hatchling turtle, you're like Gulliver on Gulliver's Travels, coming along and just like picking up this tiny little animal. You are a predator to them, or a potential predator. So, and they don't prefer to not be touching something, whether it's, you know, the ground or the water. They feel unsafe when they are held. Now that can go away over time. So, like, for instance, Jack, does he like being held? Probably not. But because he's one of our outreach ambassadors and he gets held regularly, he has become accustomed to it. So so that he hopefully minds less being held. But the main thing is like, for instance, the turtles that we care for, we handle them very, very little. We want them to live as naturally as possible and have as little stress as possible. So one of the key things with turtles and tortoises is, you know, they're not a play toy. Stressed from being held, taking that down.
All right, our next question is, what is the difference between a tortoise and a turtle?
A timeless question for a timeless animal. So, what's the difference between a turtle and a tortoise? Blow your mind, folks. A tortoise is a turtle. Okay, so turtles, tortoises, terrapins, sea turtles, these are all turtles. These are all what we call chelonians. Now, there are differences, however. They have diverged on their evolutionary paths. So tortoises are adapted for life in a terrestrial or land-dwelling environment. Turtles, generally speaking, are adapted for life in aquatic habitats, semi-aquatic, or like Jack the Box Turtle, terrestrial habitats. And they have different morphological features, the way that maybe their shell is shaped. The tortoises do not have webbing between their toes like many species of turtle do. Why need it? They don't swim in water. One of the interesting things, and people might have seen out there, is tortoises, many species have the ability to float, however, because there are species that have these big dome shells. Now, I'm not advocating go out there and put a tortoise in water and see if it can float. But if you think about the giant tortoises of the Galapagos and the Seychelles, the Aldabra Island, for instance, those tortoises can actually stay adrift at sea for sometimes months at a time, being able to float. So they're really riding the currents until they are able to then come ashore again back on the island they came from, or possibly another island within that island archipelago. So there are many characteristics between turtles and tortoises, but those are the general ones that I just told you. Good question.
Okay, so the next question is, how many eggs does a turtle typically lay? And of those, how many actually live to hatch?
Okay, so how many does a turtle lay? It can be anywhere from just one egg to 300 or more eggs per turtle. So there are some species, for instance, like these little spider tortoises that live in southern Madagascar. Okay, you're talking about an animal that's only about this big, so about 5 inches in length, and they will lay this enormous egg, just one egg, at a time, maybe 2 eggs. And that egg is so large that if there were to be any more than that, it would just be impossible. But the reproductive strategy there is that that hatchling hatches out at a much larger size ratio than, let's say, a small hatchling to a larger turtle. So think of a big sea turtle laying hundreds of eggs, okay? Those hatchlings are of a tiny size ratio to what they will become as adults. So different reproductive strategies. So there's a whole huge range of what they can lay. Now, when it comes to hatching, I can't really give you, an answer as to how many might survive hatching, because there are so many variables. The temperature being extremely important, because turtles are cold-blooded animals. They're ectotherms, and the developing turtle within the egg is completely at the whim of nature, at the whim of the temperatures around it. And that's how it incubates. But also, let's say there's flooding. Let's say there's a drought. Let's say there's temperature drops, or conversely, huge spikes in temperatures. These can all change the survivorship of a turtle hatching from an egg. Then there's also predators. And if there's more predators on the landscape, which happens routinely in urban and suburban areas like raccoons and foxes and skunks and possums, your hatch rate's going to go down. Now, what about when they survive? Same thing. Several from a nest in 1 year may survive to adulthood. In others, no eggs survive to adulthood. It is estimated for sea turtles that maybe 1 in 1,000 to 1 in 10,000 hatchlings make it all the way to adulthood. So for an animal that lives so long, this is why ensuring that the animals survive to a reproductive age and successfully reproduce is the only way that we are going to save them as animals living on our planet. Good question.
All right, the next question is Janessa asks, what is the oldest turtle with which you have worked with?
The oldest, so it can be very difficult. I know all these questions start with, well, and it can be, no, that's because, these are animals. There's all these different animals, and there's a lot of science that goes behind it. But turtles, once they get to a certain age, it can be very difficult to tell the age of the turtle. You might be off by decades. A 50-year-old turtle and an 80-year-old turtle can look the same. And so it's difficult to tell. Now, I've worked with turtles and tortoises that are 50, 60, 70, 80 years old or older. The oldest known turtle or tortoise on Earth right now is a tortoise named Jonathan. He lives on an island called St. Helena, which is on the west coast, off the west coast of Africa. And he's around 190 years old right now. And he is an Aldabra tortoise. So he was taken from the Aldabra Atoll in the Indian Ocean to St. Helena at some point, and has been passed down through generations for many, many years. Again, good question.
Okay, so the next question is, Kylie would like to know what all colors turtles can be. Can they be colors like red, orange, yellow, pink, and purple, or are they just usually green?
I'm going to refer you, Hadley, and that's a great question, to this wonderful graphic behind me. So if you see all the colors of these animals, and it's actually funny, I noticed my light changes when all of a sudden my hand gets closer. There we go. So I'll use 2 hands here. So see this turtle right there? That is called the Burmese, That is the Indian red-crowned roof turtle. And if you look at the head, they have yellows, greens, reds, whites, blues on the head. Turtles can come in so many different colors and patterns. So you can have turtles who are rather drab, so all over maybe a gray or a brown or a grayish brown. Or you could have turtles like the red-crowned roof turtle who have these very, very brilliant colors. You can have ones like the Burmese star tortoise or the radiated tortoise, which have these incredible stripes on it, or like Jack. And let's show him one more time before we have to leave today. Jack the box turtle, he has yellows, oranges, browns, grays, and if you look, red eyes. So a whole huge wide range of colors in the world of turtles and tortoises. Good question. I love it.
I think we have just one more question. We're not even halfway through the questions, so just gonna pick one random question.
The lottery winner, the question lottery
That's
winner.
the
Oh,
lottery.
somebody who's going to try to stump me.
All right, let's see. How long does it take to lay eggs, and how long does it take for an egg to hatch?
Oh, good question. That is a good one to end. So I have watched this process so many times. It's an amazing process. And guess what my answer is going to be? There's a wide range of times that it can take to lay an egg. So some of that depends on, how quick can the turtle dig? If a turtle digs its nest into hard earth, that can take hours to dig that nest and then lay those eggs. And once an egg actually moves from the oviducts down through the pelvic girdle and into the cloaca, or the opening on the tail of the turtle, that all happens rather quickly. And then the egg actually just comes out and boom, drops into the nest or into a pile of leaf litter, we'll say. But if they're digging into soft sand, it can take only minutes, 20 minutes, 30 minutes, 40 minutes to dig out a nest and lay those eggs and then cover them. So much of it depends on the substrate. Or there's some species of turtles that will actually just lay their eggs just right into leaves. They'll just crawl into a pile of leaves that is suitable for incubation of that egg, lay the egg, and then off they go. Now with the hatching time, it can be anywhere from, let's say, 50 days to over 300 days for an egg to hatch. And that is because, again, it all depends on temperatures, right? So if that species has a nice long warm season in which the temperatures stay pretty steady, that embryo, that little turtle developing inside, can develop at a nice steady pace in those warm temperatures. But what if it goes through a period in which there's cooling, okay? And this actually happens in a lot of areas in which there's the monsoon seasons, because there will be these seasonal shifts, and that embryo will go through what's called a diapause, in which they arrest development until such time as the temperatures warm back up, and then they start developing again. So it depends on humidity and temperature, what species it is, because some species just take longer to develop than others do. So that's a great question. It's a great last question. I would love to answer all the questions. So if it's on YouTube, I would love to go and I can answer a lot of the questions right into the YouTube chat after this. So for everybody watching, come back, check it out. I'll try to answer all your questions the best I can.
Perfect. I want to thank you again for your presentation, Mr. Gray, and thank you to everyone watching who was able to stay to the end. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you all. You've put together another amazing biodiversity teach-in, lots of great speakers. I'm so happy to be back. Thanks for having me back, and I look forward to the next one. So thank you all of you out there who not only watched, but who asked really good questions and the questions that hopefully I will be able to answer after we end. So goodbye from me. And of course, you know what's coming, folks. Goodbye from Jack.
Bye, Jack.
All right. See you next time.
See ya.
See you.